Hello and welcome to Kirly-Sue's Plant-Based Kitchen with me, your host, Kirly-Sue. Today we are talking about vegan fashion, and we have blogger Sarah King from the blog called, how do you pronounce it? Is it Grandermarnier?
It's Grandermarnier.
Oh,
Grandermarnier.
Yeah.
Grandermarnier.
Okay, Grandermarnier. And you are, you have a degree in fashion design.
I
So
do, yeah.
tell us a little bit about how you came to do fashion, and then how did that lead you into becoming a vegan as well?
Yeah, no problem. So I kind of I did fall into doing fashion design. I was just working before that. I hadn't gone to uni, and I just didn't really have much direction in my life. So I felt the need to do something that I was passionate about, but I didn't really know what it was.
Okay.
And I just did a taster course in fashion design, like a 10-week adult learner course that you do at night at a local college.
Yes.
And I just fell in love with it. I made myself like a denim jacket over the 10 weeks. It just really sparked that kind of first creativity that I'd felt in ages, and I just thought this is something I really want to look into. So I stayed in Bristol, in my hometown, and went to the university there and did a 3-year fashion design course. And it was amazing, and I got to learn the realities behind what goes into making clothing, which was so mind-blowing, because I'd always been really obsessed with fashion and actually bought a lot of clothes a lot of the time. With all my paychecks every month, I would just go out and buy loads of clothes. So I think a lot of people can relate.
Yeah.
I never really knew what went into actually making clothes, and the work and the hours that go into it. Well, for me anyway. So during the 3 years, I think it was 2015, so my second year of university, my boyfriend at the time was recommended I watch Cowspiracy.
Oh, yes.
That was what did it for me, actually. It was kind of, I'd say it was an overnight decision, but it took about a year processing to actually get to fully vegan after that. But it was an overnight decision that I needed to go vegan, and that I needed to explore this lifestyle more. So it was weird that it was happening at the same time as doing my fashion design degree, because in my final year in 2016, I was making my collection. So at the end of the year, everyone has to make a collection of around 12 pieces to show your work for the full 3 years. And at the time, I was working with a lot of animal materials. I know it was. I was vegetarian. I've been vegetarian since birth, but I'd never made that connection between animal materials and what I ate. I always thought of them as very separate. So I was working with leather and furs, some silk, without really making that connection in my head about where they came from. So it was kind of a journey of discovery at the same time about changing what I eat. And then I kind of started to look at the clothes the materials I was holding in my hands. And it was the first time I actually made the connection, really, that these were from a living animal. And I was, by buying these materials and using them, I was saying that was okay to do, which I didn't agree with. So it was just a moment of aligning my ethics with my actions, really. So at that point, I kind of changed my final collection, got rid of my animal materials, kind of gave them to other people on the course, and made a completely vegan collection. I didn't, I wasn't at the time advertising it as a vegan collection. It was just kind of like an accidentally vegan fashion collection, I think. So that was what sparked it for me in terms of looking into vegan fashion. And since then, I launched the blog Grandermarnier, and I try and write a weekly blog post to give more information to people out there, because I didn't really understand what vegan fashion was when I first started researching it. There wasn't that much information out there, and there really wasn't much inspiration out there for fashion, because that's what I was kind of lacking when I first started researching it, like the excitement of fashion but still vegan. It all seemed a bit tame and a bit not really my style. So I think that's what had possibly put me off it in the past, was kind of not thinking it was for me in terms of my style. So ever since 2017, I've been writing a blog post about vegan fashion, and trying to share the message about that it can still be fun, and that you can still enjoy your style and have fun with fashion, but without the need of any animal materials.
Right. So tell me some of the kind of typical things that you talk about on your blog. So kind of break it down a bit, because if you're not familiar with vegan fashion, you probably wouldn't know what would go onto a blog. So
No, of
for our
course.
listeners and viewers, tell us a little bit, like, you tell us about a couple of different posts that you've put out.
Yeah. So vegan fashion is just generally avoiding any material that comes from an animal. So you know, the leather, the fur, silk, any kind of exotic animal skin. So a lot of my blog posts are mostly educational in terms of letting people know what kind of things on care labels and what symbols mean on fashion. When you pick up a top, how to know if it's made of silk, and then what goes into making silk, and the animals that are involved behind that. And then the same with like leather. Often like leather symbols can be quite confusing. So on footwear, how to make sure that you know what material it is that you're buying. And then it's kind of a combination of some more like styling tips, like here's how you can enjoy your style but without any animal materials, that kind of thing. So a lot of what fashion bloggers do these days are kind of pushing products and pushing things that they have a motive to sell, but my blog is more about raising awareness of the vegan fashion community, and trying to guide people to a more compassionate wardrobe if they can. So I write kind of a combination of different informative kind of blog posts, but then I also do interviews with vegan fashion brand owners or designers or people in the vegan fashion community to just kind of like promote their work and say, everyone look at what these guys are doing. And then I did, for a while I was doing a brand of the month highlight as well. So there's so many vegan fashion brands out there and they don't get the same kind of publicity as mainstream brands. So what I thought I could do is kind of highlight their work even more and say, you know, if you're going to buy a new handbag, here's a great vegan brand, you know, female owned, let's go and support these guys, like that kind of things. More like small businesses mostly, but they're on the rise. There's, you know, an increasing number of larger fashion brands that are switching to vegan materials as well, which is good to see.
I see what you mean, because I noticed that in Marks and Spencer's I popped in once and they had shoes and on it said vegan, and I thought, oh, I hadn't really thought that they would do that. Not obviously all their shoes aren't vegan, but they obviously had a label to draw it to your attention. So I see what you mean. Some of the bigger brands are jumping on board with making vegan.
A lot of them had accidentally vegan products anyway, if they were using like PU leather or any kind of man-made material. They already had that a lot of the time. Like New Look, I know, was they never really had real leather. But when people realised that, you know, veganism isn't just a trend, it's here to stay, I think a lot of fashion brands kind of realised actually we can label things as vegan, and not only does it help the customer know what it is that they're buying, but it does promote them as a more, you know, ethical, animal friendly kind of brand. So it's a win. Even if it's something they were doing already, it's still helping vegan consumers buy what they want to buy, I think.
Yes. So I noticed when I was doing some research on you that you've worked with Labour Behind the Label. Tell us about that. That's interesting. I'd never heard of that organisation before.
Yeah, they I think I started volunteering with them after my fashion design degree, and they're a Bristol-based charity, but they do work across the UK with the Clean Clothes campaign, and they're all about promoting the information of garment workers and the workers' rights that we're trying to campaign for them. So it's mostly women. 80% of the garment industry is women. So it's mostly about educating everyone on what these women go through in terms of the working conditions, the pay that they have, their home life, and everything that goes on in their life that we don't really see, and that fashion brands, you know, fast fashion brands here don't want to tell us about particularly. So it's just kind of amplifying their voices and helping people make more informed decisions when they choose their clothing that they buy from. So that was another kind of journey I went on, because I'd always just bought fast fashion. ASOS, Zara, River Island were kind of my usuals that I bought every month. And then obviously the process of doing a fashion design degree helped me kind of understand, actually these aren't just pieces of clothes that you just pick up and put down. Like, they actually mean something. There's work that's gone in behind it. So working with the charity Labour Behind the Label was just more of an educational thing for me. It just really helped me understand the true cost behind fashion and what's actually happening to these women around the world who are making these fast fashion clothing. So it's a great charity. I would encourage everyone to check out their website at least and just have a look at them on social.
Yes.
There's lots of ways you can get involved, from just signing petitions to just sharing their content online, really easy things that we can all do. It's really interesting to start finding out more about what goes on behind the scenes.
There was a documentary, a series of them that was made, I'm trying to remember the name of it, where it took a group of young people from England to different countries where a lot of fashion is made and showed them what happened behind the scenes. And they were shocked because you had no idea that in some countries you can have a 4-year-old putting the sequins onto a top. And the work conditions are atrocious. And the money they get paid is terrible. So what people were thinking is, oh, if I stop buying these clothes, this will help. Well, actually, unfortunately, it doesn't, because that's a lifeline for those people. Obviously, they didn't go to school thinking, when I leave, I want to do this kind of job. They just found themselves in a particular situation where there weren't any opportunities, and this is what they've had to do. So it's an opportunity for them to make money. It's just not the best one. So it's kind of difficult. There was also, they did it for a number of, I think it was called Blood, Sweat and T-shirts. Something like that. Yes. So it showed you behind the scenes, and it's quite a hard watch, because you just think these are people who, they're stuck. They can't go anywhere else to work, and they can't really move out of their situation. So it was quite interesting to watch. So when I realized that you'd done stuff with labor behind the label, I thought this must be something linked to that documentary, some kind of same sort of approach of kind of highlighting to those of us living in Western countries, where does your cheap clothing come from, or where does your clothes come from? Because for us to get it at a reasonable price, somebody somewhere must be doing it for a cut price.
Exactly. There's people behind the profit, basically, and that's what we're never really shown. And I think that's it's an interesting thing. With when I got into vegan fashion, a lot of people were promoting fast fashion brands that had accidentally vegan clothing, and I started doing that. And then I thought, well, hang on, if I'm here campaigning for the animals behind fashion, I should be campaigning for the people behind fashion just as much. So it's just as important to find out if your clothes have been ethically made by someone making a fair living wage in good working conditions that we would want for ourselves. It's the same way I look at veganism. I wouldn't want to do to someone else what I wouldn't want done to myself. And if your friend said, oh, my boss is paying me £3 an hour and I don't get a lunch break, we wouldn't have it. We wouldn't accept that for our friends or our family. So even if we don't know these women working across the world, they're still our sisters. They're still humans. They feel and love and stuff just as much as we do. So if we're here fighting for the animals, we really need to fight for our fellow humans just as much, I think. Absolutely.
So how would you source vegan clothes? What's the best way to kind of say, if I thought, okay, right now, if I'm somebody listening to this program and they've never really thought about, wearing vegan clothes or choosing vegan fashion, where would they start, really?
I mean, what I used to say was just start with a simple Google search, because most of the online brands most of the brands that would sell vegan fashion are online. Mostly they wouldn't have like a brick and mortar store on the high street thing. But today, like we've been saying, it's fairly murky in terms of whether they are a fast fashion brand, or whether like selling polyester clothing or PU leather, which isn't great for the environment, but they can slap a vegan label on it and sell it as something green and eco-friendly, which isn't great. So now I try and find curated lists. So on my website I have an A to Z brand list with over 50 vegan fashion brands who make their clothes ethically, and they use sustainable materials, and as well they're 100% vegan as well. So I would start, not to blow my own trumpet, but start with my list if you can.
Okay.
and find other online resources like that, where you can find, if you search, vegan and ethical clothing, you're bound to find new brands that you possibly haven't heard of before. And the main thing is to just start looking at people's websites, and if they have a tab on their page which explains who makes their clothes or how they make them, or whether they check their factories and audit them and that kind of thing, then they're generally going to be a sign of a good brand that's actually taken control of what's going on, and they're making sure that they're taking responsibilities for the people who make their clothes. But if you go onto a fashion website and it's just purely about the clothes and they don't tell you anything behind the scenes, that's usually a red flag that they don't really care about it, or they're not willing to disclose with you everything that they should. So transparency is a key indicator that a brand is going to be making their clothes ethically and sustainably.
Yeah, just to kind of bring this to focus more on the ethical side of it for a second. Adventist Radio is owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, so I'm a Seventh-day Adventist as well, which is a Christian religion, and obviously as a Christian we promote being kind to one another, and particularly the ethical side. I mean, no Christian is going to really, real Christian is going to really endorse somebody basically working in slave labor when they don't, it's not a good thing. So from a Christian point of view, even if you're not a Christian, from a human point of view, it's something that, because a lot of our listeners are Seventh-day Adventists, would be interested in how to source ethical fashion as well as vegan fashion items as well, because there's a moral, I would say, a moral lesson behind this, and a lot of the time we don't know that people are being mistreated in order to produce fashion at an affordable price, or at a price that's good for the person selling, the company selling it. So it's really good for us to know. So in sourcing ethical clothing, I think that's a really good tip, and thank you for that, to kind of look at who you're buying it from and what do they say about themselves. And as Oprah says, when people tell you who they are, believe them. So if they're avoiding something, then there's something to look into.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you wish the fashion industry would change? If you were in a position to say, right, this is what we need to change, what do you wish they would change? And
so I think the main thing, and it's it's not even just with fashion industry, with most industries, they really need to look at their transparency first and foremost. They need to be really honest about what they're doing at the moment, even if it's not a pretty picture at the moment. If they say, look, this is where we are, we know it's not right, this is X, Y, and Z that we're doing to change it, that would even give me faith in a brand. I may not financially support them, but that would give me faith that a brand is actually genuinely trying to change, and not just greenwashing us, where they're saying all these keywords and stuff, but they're not actually doing much behind the scenes. So that would be the main thing, is to see that a brand is being upfront and honest about where they are and where they're trying to get to in terms of being ethical and sustainable. And then the main thing is that that they're trying to change in some way. That I want to see a fashion brand that's not just using polyester or cheap cotton. I want to see a brand that's actually committing to using fair trade organic cotton, or they're working with local artisans across the world instead of just kind of culturally appropriating people's work that and just stealing it and taking credit, things like that. So it's not one or two things, annoyingly. There's quite a lot of different ethical strands to fashion that people need to address as a fashion brand owner. But the main thing is that they're being upfront about what they're doing and what they're changing, and that they're not trying to take credit for other people's work as well. There's a lot of that goes on in ethical fashion. Small brands are having a really hard time trying to stand out and grow as a business, and then big brands can often come in and steal their ideas and things like that, which isn't great. So obviously the most ethical clothing you have are the ones already in your wardrobe. Second is secondhand clothing, so charity shops, thrift stores, they're all out there. Everything you need is already out in circulation. And then third, I would say go for smaller independent ethical brands where you can see from their website that they're really upfront about what they're doing. And then it just depends as well, because I never want to tell someone, I don't know, I'm not going to presume to know what someone's financial situation is either, but we can all afford most of secondhand clothing.
Oh yeah.
I would say that's the most ethical and sustainable choice you can do, if money's an object. If money's no object, you know, lucky for you, but I would say go for the more expensive brands where they're really upfront about what they're doing, and have really good sustainable and ethical clothes to sell.
It's interesting you say about secondhand clothing, because I worked with a lady once who, she was quite well-to-do, I mean, very well-to-do. And I was quite amazed when she said, besides her underwear and occasionally shoes, all of her clothing was secondhand.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know. I mean, there's a stereotype that secondhand clothes looks a certain way, but obviously not. And I was quite surprised, because she was ever so, you know, posh, if you want to describe her that way. And she was like, oh no, I always buy it secondhand. She said, because it saves so much money. And she said, and it avoids waste. She said, because she will buy them, she'll go to like a wealthy area and go to charity shops there, because she says, you'd be surprised what people get rid of. She said it also helps the charity and so forth as well. So I think that's quite an interesting one about buying secondhand. But one thing about vegan fashion, do you think some people, or is it a myth that it can be expensive if you buy new?
I don't think it's necessarily a myth. I think that there are very expensive brands out there selling vegan clothing and possibly, you know, putting a higher markup on it than needs to be. But it all depends on what kind of buyer you are anyway. So if you already buy expensive clothing, you could just switch to buying expensive vegan fashion, and you wouldn't have to spend any more. You would just switch from animal materials to vegan materials. But if you're someone like me who tries to not spend too much, and just try and buy good value clothing if I can, then you're looking at more mid-range fashion clothes, fashion brands, sorry. So I think it does get a bit tricky in terms of what you think is expensive compared to what you previously thought was expensive, because that was something I had to go through, in terms of thinking that I used to think that £5 for a t-shirt was a good price. And then when you realise actually what the worker would get for a £5 t-shirt, you know, that's the thing. That's the true cost behind fashion. When you break it down, it's not just about what you pay; it's about who gets paid at every step along the way. You know, who grew the cotton, who, you know, made the thread, who sewed it together, who transported it, who packaged it. There's so many people involved that if you're paying, you know, pennies and pounds for a piece of clothing, you really can't. You know, there's no way that someone's going to be paid fairly throughout the system for that. No. So I think that's as well reevaluating what you think is expensive for clothing, because I was buying clothing so frequently that it had to be cheap in order for me to do it that often. But then I realized I don't need to be buying this many clothes and, you know, going out and wearing a dress once and then never wearing it again. It wasn't a great way to be living. So
very Paris Hilton to do that.
Literally, it was just, you know, it was when I was enjoying going out and stuff with my friends, and it was that there was, you know, a negative association with wearing something more than once. And I think that's come with age. As I've got older, I realized I don't really care what people think, because if I wear something more than once, you know. So there's still so many stigmas that we need to, like you said, there's still stigma behind charity clothes, charity shop clothes, and wearing things multiple times, or, you know, if you have something that doesn't look as brand new, you know, there's still stereotypes about what that means about you as a person. So I think there's a lot of hurdles to overcome before we get to somewhere where everyone feels comfortable buying secondhand clothing.
I think with secondhand clothing, I mean, you don't have to go into a charity shop. You can actually go onto eBay and buy things secondhand as well. So if you have issues about being seen in a charity shop because you're on your ethical clothing journey, then perhaps you can try eBay or some other online source to get them, because it doesn't have to.
Exactly. Or I've been using Depop, which is just an app that I put on the phone, and I think it's very similar to the fast fashion experience, which is why it's been really popular, especially with younger people, because they like that almost social media type feel about their shopping experience. So, you know, you can have the fun and the thrill of looking out for a new item that you're looking for and searching for it and using all the filters, and that's what people enjoy out of looking for clothes. And then it's just sold by, you know, regular people like us who just want to make a bit of extra money, which I think is great.
Okay. Great. So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Oh, wow. I think I'm fairly ambitious. I have a lot of different ideas about where I'd like to be in 5 years. So if I had to pick one, it would mainly be to just be able to grow the blog and able to make it my full-time job, so I could really give it my all, and just develop my career in writing, because that's what I'm really passionate about, is being able to like write blogs or articles and things like that. So in 5 years, it would be amazing if I could write for large publications, online or print, and be able to share the message of vegan fashion on a more mainstream level than what I'm doing already. But yeah, just other than that, just to grow Grandermarnier and hope that more people can read it and enjoy the information that I'm sharing.
Okay, that's great. So I know you studied fashion, do you work within the fashion industry at the moment, or do you have a collection or anything?
No, I don't. I kind of came out of the 3 years and realized it's very difficult to make clothes, and I enjoyed doing it, but the time it took and everything, you really have to have 100% passion behind that, and I didn't have that. So I was very honest with myself that if you want to try and make it in terms of making clothes and making money out of it, it has to be 100% passion or nothing at all. So I decided not to go down the route of actually making clothes, but writing about fashion was something that I developed over the 3 years in terms of my passion. So I've come away with like a massive appreciation of what goes into making clothes, and that's really helped me with informing my writing and like knowing what I'm talking about, that kind of thing. So no, I don't have a collection, but I just have a collection of writing and blogs that I keep on my website.
That are very useful, I may add.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us where we can find you online on social media. Yes, where
so my main website is www.grandermarnier.com, and then I've got an Instagram and a Twitter account as well, which are the same, just the Grandermarnier handle. So I share content on Instagram as much as I can and link back to my website, but I try and post a weekly blog post if I have the time. I do have a full-time job as well, so
okay.
I have a common battle of balance and everything, but yeah, that's how people can find me. And if they want to ask me any questions, they can message me through the website, or grandermarnier@gmail.com if they want to send me an email as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been really great to speak with you today and to learn a little bit about vegan fashion and ethical fashion as well. Thank you so much.